coaches. We're at Eden Park, Michael Jones' statue. Very special place for me. Makes me very emotional. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Eden Park. I know that we've done a lot of technical and tactical modules up to now, but there's been a big demand to talk about the game off the field and planning for the season. And I quite frankly think this is more important than the actual playing of the game, because if you get this part right, you can play to your potential. And it's about people. It's not about you as the coach. It's about that group of people becoming one. You know, the guys who manage the side and coach the side and condition the side, and the playing team becoming one. So how do you do that? I think it's about selecting the right people. If you select the right people, then you've got a chance. And that's the best people that you can get hold of. And I often see coaches selecting people who they think are inferior to them. I think that's the right word. And I don't think that's the way you get great sides together. So you need the best people, people who are better than you. People like Wayne Smith, who I worked with. He was the best coach I've ever worked with. Outstanding in his culture of the team and in his knowledge of the game and his work ethic and things like that. So an assistant coach like that. A conditioning coach, a strength and conditioning coach who's going to give your guys the edge. A facilitator or a manager. I'd like to think they're facilitators, people who get things done for you. Facilitate individual development programs for players. They make sure they're happening. Because you are the coach. You need to coach that team to win on the park. So selecting of those people is critical, and the number is going to be your circumstance. Like the All Blacks had 14, the English had a lot more than that management, as you know. But you may only have 3 or 4, and so that's critical. And then in your players, you need people who can lead. You know, like Martin Johnson, great leader, John Smith, Richie McCaw. Now you'll have those guys in your team at your level. Those people who can lead, and you get shoulder to shoulder with them so that team can be brilliant. Daniel Carter or Johnny Wilkinson, the navigator of the side. Who is your navigator? Because you don't play the game. You need people on the field who can run the game the way you want the game run. And the connection with the Martin Johnsons and the Johnny Wilkinsons or the Richie McCaws and the Daniel Carters, the connection of the coach to those people is absolutely critical. So if you're connected and on the same page, and it's black, everybody's on the same page, black and white, then you've got a chance. Then you've got a chance of doing it right. So my first advice is the right people to connect with and get tight with who run that team. The second thing I think you need to do is chunk the season. What I mean by chunk, you divide the season into various time slots. So you have a pre-season conditioning time. Right? So that's under the sports and conditioning man, your mate, who's doing that, and each of those players are on a personal program of pre-conditioning. It has to be personal to get the best out of them. Some will have a weakness in repeated speed, some will have a weakness in strength, so that needs to be personalised. So that's the first part. And then you get to the second chunk, which is pre-season games plus conditioning. And then as your season goes on, you chunk it into the number of games. And the All Blacks, we used to chunk 3 games. And we'd get up on the crow's nest and look ahead and say, what are the strategies we need to implement to win those 3 games? And there were things like individual improvement, right? Things like connecting with each other so they're all on the same page. The players with the leaders on the team, the captain and the vice captain, and the leaders of the team with the management, the coaches, so there's good connection. Things like the leaders leading well, leading by example at training and on the game. Like the leaders have to be the best players. That's their responsibility. That's why they're leaders. Things like how do you handle pressure? So they are the strategies. And you need to work out the strategies that you need to implement to do well in that first chunk of the season, etc. And then you evaluate that, and then you set the next chunk. just want to go back also to those pre-season games and the reason why you play those pre-season games. Obviously there's a game fitness criteria there, that you want to nail that. But also you want to implement your game plan, the way you want to play the game, both on attack and defence, and that's a way of starting to establish the game plan that you're trying to play. With your senior players, with your leaders on the field, and your assistant coach, so you're all on the same page and you're trying to implement that game plan and get everybody understanding what you're trying to do there. There's also a selection vehicle. You know, you've got maybe 30 players, I don't know, 25 players, and you're trying to establish who was in the top 15, who was the best number 9, who was the best 15, who was the best hooker in the team, and this is a selection vehicle. You know, I often asked, do you select with talent or character? Young people with talent, or you select young people with character? Well, you'd like to think they've got both, wouldn't you? And that happens occasionally. And a lot of young guys today and young girls today playing the game have got both. But sometimes you get a very talented person who lacks the team culture. What do you do with that person? Well, I select them. Because you can't buy talent. You can't buy talent, people. You've got to, if that person's got that talent, you can develop the character. You can develop that person to fit into the culture of your team. You can give it your best shot. So I think a coach's job is to develop talent. And they will develop the character. There's many people who have become international stars in many sports who have been hugely talented, but difficult people who have finished up as hugely talented and role models for the rest of the world in sport. So I think that's our job as coaches, develop talent. They don't come along. They don't come along that often. So those pre-season games are especially important for you to set the standards for the seasons and set the team patterns and the game plan. So it's very important. I mentioned before that the people were important. We mentioned the conditioning coach. And you may think, well, it's easy for Graham Henry to talk about those things because he's got all the resources. And you may not have those resources, but I want you to think outside the square here. I've just had some connections with some schools in New Zealand who have appointed a conditioning person for all their sporting teams. And they put people, young people, girls and boys, on individual programs. And they run those programs. And those schools and those teams are becoming very successful because they've gone outside the norm to create something special, and that has helped in the sporting success of the teams of that school. So I think if you really think about it, there may be a resource person in your club or your school that can help you with those sort of things, and that's just an example. How you set your strategies for those pre-season games, I think is very important. And we've talked about your management team, and we've talked about the conditioner and you as the coach and a facilitator, manager and assistant coach, and those people being on the same page. But you also need your leaders, your rugby leaders, involved in setting the objective and the strategies to achieve what you want in pre-season and as the season goes on. And how do you select those leaders? How do those people become part of that management group, if you like? Because I think rugby teams today should be dual managed by oldies like me and young fellas who play the game, and if you can pull those two groups together, then you've got something special. How do you select those people? Originally they were selected in the All Blacks, for example, they were selected by the players. That didn't work out as well as we'd hoped because some were reluctant leaders, and then we selected them ourselves. And their job was to run the game on the field and to integrate new players into the team. I just repeat that. Help implement the game plan on the field and integrate new players. And they did that superbly. It wasn't a big task. It was just a small extension of their job to be the best players on the field. And it worked out brilliantly. So, as I said, the people who plan the year are a combination of the people who play and the people who coach and manage that side. If you can get that us feeling, it's pretty special. We were talking about that leadership group, you know, and the management and the players joining together to dual manage that team. And I said I thought that was hugely important to the success of your side. I think that group needs to enter the danger, speak their minds, because you're never going to improve unless you do that. And so players need to say what they think, what's going on in their minds, if you're going to keep on improving, and get a bit emotional. And when you get that, you get a unity. Now, you're not always going to agree, and so you need to have a policy of disagreeing and committing to what the group, the majority of the group, want to do. And I think if you have that as a base, then you can sort out a lot of things. What do you do each week? How do you plan each week to get the best out of the team? Well, I think the first thing you've got to do is have some time to review the previous game and the good things and the things that you need to work on so that you include that in your program. And I know that you're all different. Some of you will train a couple of times a week, others will train more. So I'm going to be generic here. So we need to do the physical things early in the week, the scrummaging, the defence training early in the week, and leave your non-contact, your attack strategy to later in the week as a generalisation. But we need to keep on learning, don't we? And I think you need to try and be better every day. So to learn from the last game, keep on developing the individuals and the team, do the physical things early in the week, scrummaging and defence, and then the attack later in the week, as I'm just repeating myself, but just to make sure you're clear on that. I think one of the sessions which is very important is a clarity session. That may last half an hour, where you're going over things quietly, maybe indoor, where you're going over defensive strategy or defensive pattern and making sure you've got alignment right and everybody knowing their roles. Or new attack things. You know, you might have a new attack set up off the left-hand scrum and it's new to this game and you want everybody to understand it totally. If you do that at 100 mile an hour, they're not going to be able to understand. But if you just do it quietly, fast walking speed, A does this, B does this, C does this, then they're going to understand, and then you can increase the intensity after that clarity session on the field, and they'll get it very quickly. So just take your time, so they have the time to understand anything new that you're trying to introduce. There's a lot of talk about motivation and how do you get your side up every week to play superbly in the weekend. And that's very critical, because if they're flat, they're not going to do the business. And so how do you maintain intensity week in and week out? Maybe impossible. We're all trying to do that. I think it's about what you do every day during the week to get them to that intensity. It's not about the coach banging on the table on a Thursday night or a Saturday before the game. That's not going to work. It starts on the Monday, and you create a culture, a feeling all week, and it builds and builds till they play on the weekend. And that happens at the start of the season, doesn't it? You set that tone. You set that tone in preconditioning period, in the pre-season games and conditioning period, always setting and building on the culture and the togetherness and the tightness and the determination of that group. And so it's part of the team. It's not something that happens on a Thursday night or a Saturday before the game. So I can't stress enough the need to build that feeling in the team every time you're with the team. And that's the coach's job. Your expectations of that team is to be the best they can be, and your assistant coach and your conditioner and your facilitator, your manager and your captain and your leaders are always trying to build that feeling and that expectation that we're going to develop into a hugely good team and we're going to play well on Saturday. Let's go another step forward, coaches, and talk about the analysis in the game. And I couldn't coach without analysing the opposition and analysing our team. It's a hugely important tool, and you may have access to being able to do that, or you may not. And in some cases, that resource is not that far away. You know, there may be a department in your school that's got that resource. Often students in the school are very good at filming, and they'd love to have that opportunity, and you can use them to help. But I think it helps your coaching immensely. So if the game is filmed and you can review it, the players are going to learn a huge amount from that. Now in our situation, we've got an analyst, all right? But I analyse the games myself because I learn a huge amount from that, and that helps my coaching. So I think you've got to take the responsibility of doing the hard work, the analysis of the game yourself. And you may even have the opportunity of analysing the opposition. If you're a club coach or whatever, or you may have somebody go and film their game so they can analyse the way they play, and that'll help you to win on Saturday. Now I think analysis is probably 25% of winning. If you do it right and everything else is equal in your team, you're going to increase the chances of your team being successful. That's how important I think it is. So although it may be difficult for you, I think it's something you've got to try and tick that box. Try and tick that box if you want to be and you're serious about being a successful rugby coach. Let's talk about individual sessions now, and they need to be planned. Each session that you're coaching needs to be planned, and 80 minutes is the ultimate time. If you ask your players how much time they need, they'll say 80 minutes, because that's the length of the game, all right? And quite often we extend it to 2 hours and a bit more, and that just takes the edge off them for Saturday. So you've got to be totally planned to do that properly. And the way you conduct yourself, your energy, your posture, the way you speak is critical to the tone of that training. Every time you're in front of that group, they are looking at you. Your expectation is critical. So your expectation of them is in your body language, is in the way you speak to them, is the way you demand excellence and so on. So that is critical. So a general training run needs to have a warm-up, obviously, and the warm-up can be activities that are important in the game. It doesn't mean to say that you run round the track or you run from the goal line to the 22 and back. You should be doing activities that are going to help you in your ability to play the game as a team. So there might be defensive alignment activities in the warm-up. And let's talk about defence for a minute in this program, this 80-minute program. Then you might have activities. Break the team into 3 groups. One group doing tracking for tackling. So they track. Don't tackle, but they track correctly. One team whapping, which is the hit and wrap, which I call whap. And I think that's important, that you get that together. And you might be a guy working on his role as assist tackler, all right? As the assist tackler and what his role is. And his role is obviously to assist the tackler in staying on his feet and go past the ball so that you can have a chance to turn over. And he's a menace in that tackle. So if he can drag in extra attackers, they've got less attackers to attack with. So I think you need a part of that. I think you need to expose these guys, and so do some one-on-one tackling at times, because that's important in the game. Then you practice as a team against patterns of the opposition, the attack patterns. So they might hit off the first ruck, or they might hit off 9 or hit off 10, and you need to be able to make sure that your guys are looking up, they're seeing where the numbers are, they're adjusting their defensive positions, and so on. Also to defend against the attack setups of the opposition, the options they're going to throw at you from the scrum and line out, right field scrum, midfield scrum, left field scrum, and so on. So that you are totally at ease, that they know what the opposition are going to do and how you're going to defend that. Now some of you won't have that information, so you have to generalise, but that's the way you practice defence, and that's what you do in that 80 minutes. And obviously it's different for attack and so on. Let's just summarise that practice plan. Now you know what you're going to do in your warm-up, your activities, your team practice, and you know who's going to take that, you or the assistant coach or the players themselves, maybe sometimes. So it's very clear the time and who's responsible and what you're going to do, and it's all on that plan. I used to keep the plans. I probably still got them somewhere, because you go back to them. What did we do last week in that activity? How can we improve? What can we can add to that? So if you've got a record of that plan on your computer, or as for me on a piece of paper, you can keep adding to it and improving on it. Just to summarise that planning again, I think it's very important to chunk the year, right? Pre-season conditioning, pre-season games and conditioning, then chunk the year into acceptable time chunks that you set strategy and evaluate those time chunks so you're always improving. Second point, I think it's dual management. Dual management with the players and some of the management team to plan that season, to plan each week together so that you're all on the same page and there's a very strong connection between all of you. Each week that you plan each session, right down to the 80 minutes, and you know what you're doing every second and who is responsible. That you plan the game plan together as a management group, players and coaches, and then pass that on to the rest of the team together, so that you're tight, you're all on the same page and you're black and white. And I can't emphasise enough the need for the coach to set the expectation by the way he conducts himself, by his energy, by his emotion, by his body language. You are responsible. That's where the buck stops. If you can get your Richie McCaws alongside you doing the same thing, and your Wayne Smith's doing the same thing, you've got a strong unit, haven't you? So who's your Richie? Who is your Wayne? And you know who you are. Get them together so you're very strong as a group. So good luck with your planning, because it's critical. And you won't be 100% out there on the field unless you get that right and get the people connected strongly. That's it for now, coaches. But it's an area of the game that I'm particularly interested in, getting things right off the park, getting people tight and working all in the one direction to produce something special. Quite happy to share those experiences and knowledge with you. Just contact theragbysite.com with any questions you may have or anything else you might want information on, and we'll put something together for you. So keep the questions coming. Enjoyed talking to you. All the best with your coaching.